Download the My Hingham app today and report issues and get information on town government with ease. Available on the App Store and Google Play. You can submit service requests or gain information with just a few taps on your phone. Using the My Hingham app puts immediate access to town resources in the palm of your hand, including calendars of meetings and events, agendas for upcoming meetings, building permit filing options, online bill payment options, and info about our boards, committees, departments, and services. For more information, please scan the QR code on your screen.
Good evening. This is February 25th, 2025. The time is 6 p.m. I'm convening this meeting of the Select Board of the Town of Hingham. This meeting is being held in person and/or remotely as an alternate means of public access pursuant to Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2023 and all other applicable laws temporarily amending certain provisions of the Open Meeting Law. You are hereby advised that this meeting and all communications during this meeting may be recorded by the Town of Hingham in accordance with the Open Meeting Law. If any participant wishes to record this meeting, please notify the chair at the start of the meeting in accordance with Mass General Laws, Chapter 38, Section 20F, so that the chair may inform all other participants of said recording. Is there anyone recording? Seeing none, I note for the record that participating in the meeting this evening is Liz Klein and myself, Joe Fisher. Bill Ramsey is unavailable this evening. I don't think the school committee yet has a quorum.
We do.
Oh, you do?
We're online. Yep.
Okay. Are you continuing or are you starting your meeting?
Yeah.
Starting.
We're starting.
Okay. So do you want to call your meeting to order?
Please. I will call to order the February 25th, 2025 school committee meeting. I am here in person, myself, Ness Correnti, Jen Benham, Allie Anderson, and Michelle Ayer, and participating online are Carrie Nee and Tim Miller-Dempsey.
Great. Welcome.
Thank you.
We will move to the Pledge of Allegiance. I'm sorry? Oh, did you adopt our language?
I will adopt the language indicated by the chair at the start of the meeting. Thank you.
Great. Now we move to the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Next item on our agenda is approval of minutes. We will defer minutes until the next meeting. So we will begin with the proclamation of February as Black History Month. We have prepared a proclamation that Liz and I will be reading into the record.
Town of Hingham, Massachusetts, Black History Month Proclamation. Whereas Black History Month was first celebrated nationally in 1976 during the United States bicentennial, and whereas the President of the United States and the Governor of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts have each issued statements recognizing February 2025 as Black History Month. And whereas Black History Month has a rich cultural history throughout the United States, symbolizing the enduring strength and significance of civil rights pioneers, including Martin Luther King Jr., Rosa Parks, Phyllis Wheatley, and Frederick Douglass. And whereas Black History Month is a time to celebrate and acknowledge the significant history and contributions of the Black community throughout the United States, as well as to bring awareness to the challenges faced by the Black community and the methods by which they have tirelessly worked to conquer such adversity.
And whereas, as the 250th anniversary of the American Revolution is upon us, we recognize that African American men, both enslaved and free, fought in the Continental Army during the Revolutionary War, including numerous Black men who fought in militia units raised in our town, the town of Hingham. And whereas the town of Hingham is committed to moving towards equality, recognizing the barriers faced by the Black community, and addressing structural racism and social, political, and economic inequalities. Now therefore we, Joseph M. Fisher, William C. Ramsey, and Elizabeth F. Klein, Hingham Select Board, do hereby proclaim February 2025 to be Black History Month and urge each citizen to take cognizance of this event and participate fittingly in its observance. Given under our hands and seal of Hingham this 25th day of February 2025. I'm now prepared to accept the motion.
I will make a motion to proclaim the month of February as Black History Month in the town of Hingham.
Second, roll call vote. Liz?
Aye.
And I'm an aye as well. Next item on our agenda is a joint session with the Advisory Committee, School Committee, and Capital Outlay Committee to discuss the fiscal year 26 Capital Outlay Committee recommendations. I believe we have an AdCom committee of one. Mr. Stephen Pohl, are you? Have you usurped all authority for the?
Been promoted.
Okay, so we will resume our meeting and ask the Advisory Committee to call its committee meeting to order.
Thank you. Adopting the same language that you used to call your meeting to order, I'll call the advisory committee.
And it is, I believe, our practice to inform the residents who is participating on your committee.
That is correct. Tonight, we have in the room Joe Griffin, Al McDonald, Brenda Black, Ted Siokas, Stephen Pohl, Kevin Freitag, myself, Tina Sherwood, Carol Tully, Jerry Seelan, Dave Leaphart, John Germain, Elaine Cusker, and Kathy Curley. And online, we have Brian Stack and Ben Lee.
Thank you. And then we also have the school committee, which has called itself to order already, and capital outlay.
Good evening. Order. Capital 25th of February. We have George Danis, Ted Ziokas, Steve Pohl in the room with myself, and Lindsay Cruiser online.
And you've adopted
I
the,
will adopt the language previously read by yourself.
great. So we will then move forward to the presentation of the capital outlay committee.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Fisher. For those of you who haven't had a chance to meet yet, my name is Michael Donovan. It's been my privilege this year to serve as chair of the Capital Outlay Committee. It's my 5th year on the committee, and hopefully we can share this evening the great work that we've been able to put together in conjunction with the department heads and the town and Michelle, and sort of share our recommendations from the information we've received thus far about fiscal 26. So next slide, please, Michelle. Awesome. So first of all, I want to thank everyone on the committee for all the effort that's put forth this year. We had Lindsay Cruiser, who is a veteran for the committee in her 2nd year, and we had 3 new members, George, Ted, and Steve, all who brought unique perspectives from professional and experience in the town that really helped us ask, I think, important questions to our departments as they presented their capital requests, and really led us to think about how we may change how we look at capital outlay as a committee and what the town needs to do in the future going forward. In addition to Michelle, has been a valuable asset for our team once again, driving this work. So next slide, please, Michelle. Okay, so before we get started, I think it's good to just refresh everyone for what the committee's charge is. So I'm not going to read the slide in its entirety, but the TLDR is, our committee is tasked with making recommendations for not only the tax levy for the town, which the financial policy is between 3 to 6% of the budget. So sort of that's been historically where most departments receive their major capital items, but also to make recommendations for other financing sources. So whether that is a warrant article suggestion, unassigned fund balance, capital stabilization, the town has other options for funding as well. So I just wanted to share what our charge is and sort of how we went back to that throughout the discussions this year. Okay, so on slide 4, we've got our total capital requests. So this includes all funding sources. It's inclusive of all the information that we were presented thus far in the process. I believe it's probably missing the Senior for Active Living from a funding request need, but it is the most comprehensive ask we've had. I think one thing to note is as we do this process each year, we ask departments to think about in a 5-year view what they would need. And it's really important to look at 28 and 29, 28 specifically because that's the low number on this particular graph, but that's up 80% from last year when we looked at fiscal 28 requests from departments. So obviously a lot is changing. The cost of goods that we need to purchase is up significantly. Obviously, the fire truck that we funded last year, the warrant article at $1.2 million. Previously, when we bought one, it was $400,000. So just as an example, these numbers are going to keep going up. So just because 28's low at the moment, I would expect that to be higher next year, and also 29 and 30. So I think it just sort of sets the tone for the need that the town has a lot of requests. We have to make sure we're funding them. And if we're not addressing it today, it's going to cost us more later. So. Next slide, please, Michelle. So taking a deeper dive into sort of the tax levy and stabilization fund, which historically is where this committee has been asked to allocate capital projects. I have on the slides here for what we've funded in the past for 24 and 25, what our requests were, as well as sort of the limits of our capital charge. So the 3% line is on the bottom, the 6% line is up top. I just wanted to share this and to set the stage of if the town aggressively was on the upper end of its funding for capital outlay, closer to 6%, we'd probably be able to fund a lot of the requests the departments had coming in and would sort of stop the cycle of having to kick stuff forward, having to pay more for more later. And I've got a subsequent slide that's going to sort of show the compounding impacts of staying more at the 3% level. So are any questions on sort of what this slide's showing? We'll refer to it later. No? Okay. So this year we wanted to take a little different approach. Typically in the past we have hosted our meetings at Town Hall here. Department heads have come and shared via PowerPoint presentations and spreadsheets and had staff come as well, sort of talk through the needs of their departments and sort of what was broken, what needed to be fixed, what's critical to their mission. This year we thought it would be really helpful for the committee, given all the requests that we have and sort of the high dollar nature of some of those requests, to go to the actual department sites and see the assets in person, allowing the staff to sort of show us the complexities with continual repair, why this asset needed to be fixed. So we had meetings at the fire station, DPW, library, town hall, country club, the high school. So those were really invaluable for our team to hear firsthand and see firsthand the needs of the town, have really highlighted some of the challenging situations some of these assets are in. So I want to thank all the department heads for hosting us too. It was great to see. There's more behind the window at the DPW than just getting your sticker. So that's good. So this is the criteria that our committee has used in the past and used this year as well for evaluating projects. So as you can imagine, we've got a lot of projects. Everyone wants to get everything funded. But when you sort of stack order these projects versus each other, really focusing on things that are safety and risk perspective, not only for our employees, but also our citizens. So if something's broken, not going to allow them to do their job, that's sort of top of the list. Broken core emissions sort of falls in the second bucket. Things that are end of life, thinking about DPW vehicles that keep our roads clean, plow the snow, compact our trash, et cetera. And then significant repairs. Obviously, there's some warrant articles that are outside the scope of the capital that we've been allocated from the tax levy that we'll sort of, we'll talk about in a bit, as well as looking at the payback time for them. I know last year we had some funding for ADA accessible and sort of green initiative programs. So we want to think about holistic town projects so that we're not doing work that's going to be ultimately either need to be redone or could be done more efficiently in our project. So any questions thus far? Okay. So just about the process, you understand sort of how we got to where we are today. So ClearGov was a new software system that we began to use last year from a capital perspective. I think we saw a lot of efficiency gains this year from A, easy comparisons, B, familiarity with departments in updating their requests. And it really has allowed us to have a good electronic digital record of the requests of prior price points, sort of capturing the assets, condition with pictures and stuff. So I think there's a lot of like transparency that is going to exist not only for the committees here, but also for the residents. The departments put all their capital requests together. Certainly want to thank the departments that have a ton of those requests. DPW and school committee come to mind there. We followed up with them and asked sort of questions about why this project was important, how it sort of fit into their core mission. Was it going to keep the staff safe, citizens, sort of help us to get a little more context other than we need a new item. So we looked at also projects with dedicated funding sources, obviously for sewer that's funded by ratepayer and the country club. Looked at those on a separate schedule, but also asked the same types of questions on sort of how we're thinking about those projects are going to be funded and those communications to ratepayers and such for anything that they're spending there. We spent a lot of time deliberating on sort of the challenges that our committee is faced with. We have a lot of requests, as you saw earlier, and not as much money to fulfill those, and thinking about how we as voters can think about stacking that up so we feel good about sharing that with our neighbors, but also making the best recommendations to AdCom and the select board on how the town should spend its money and invest in its assets. And then our goal is to fund as many as possible. And I think what we'll present tonight is a creative solution to do that, that sort of blends the way we've done stuff in the past and sort of how we need to change to do stuff in the future as well. So next slide. Any questions? Feel free to hop in. Okay. So just wanted to sort of share an overall view of the funding that we have at the moment. And as I said, this does exclude the Center of Active Living and a couple other small projects, but we're going to spend our time this evening on projects talking about the capital outlay allocation down at the bottom, which is from the tax levy, and our recommendation to consider using some unassigned fund balance to fund some projects. We obviously have borrowing and enterprise funds, some other sources, the waterways for the harbor master's requests, ambulance receipts, and a few other things as well. So majority of our discussion is going to be on unassigned fund balance and capital outlay, but I just wanted to sort of share the holistic picture and tie back to where we were earlier. Okay. So this is where we get to our recommendation part. And so we'll just start at the bottom because that number is not 3.5 million. So as we evaluated all these requests, our committee really felt it was imperative for the town to sort of have a stretch goal this year and really go above and beyond the tax levy when it came to investing in our capital assets. So the way we sort of I'll talk about our approach first. So we looked at all the projects. There's a lot more than the 3.5. And then we started looking at, well, what could we cut as a committee and feel good about making a recommendation? And we weren't really able to come up with that number. And I'm going to talk specifically about the DPW. I've been on the committee for 5 years. There's a lot of the heavy truck assets that have been on there that have not been replaced and have continued to be deferred. And we'll have an example of a photo coming up, but we were at DPW, we saw these vehicles, they're like literally falling apart. And I know with the recent storms, it's imperative that our roads stay clean so the citizens get places. If we don't invest in those machines, like we're gonna be in a tough spot. So we took a step back and said, let's think about fully funding DPW this year in the transfer station from a sort of a deferred asset standpoint. Because if we don't, they cost $300,000. If we don't think about putting a stake in the ground and fixing those machines and buying new ones, we're going to be in a tough spot. So that was sort of our package of carving out. That's our consideration for using unassigned fund balance to fund all of that. The other departments were able to then fully fund most all of them to 100%. The school department were able to fund all of their projects that they labeled Tier 1 and Tier 2, which is great. Last year, we were only able to fund their Tier 1 projects. And thank you, Aisha, for helping us understand what was a priority for you. The police almost fully funded. The fire department is only at 50%, but I will call out that is short of a $200,000 community match for a boat grant. So that's one thing there. And then for Bear Cove, it was for a building that's in the order of $300,000, which we deferred to. So this recommendation allows us to fund almost all departments' requests this year, and I think is a really good use of available funds that we have this year that we haven't had in the past year to put a dent in some of the challenges from a DPW and heavy machinery standpoint we've seen at the transfer station. So maybe I'll stop there and ask if there's any questions before we go on.
I think we're ready for you to continue, and then
Okay.
we're gonna hit you at the end.
Okay, no worries. Okay. So next slide. So I thought I'd just share like some of what we saw in person, and it's hard to do justice with a picture, but this is the Bear Cove truck. There's one vehicle that patrols Bear Cove and keeps it clean. I've actually had the privilege to ride in this vehicle, volunteering with Cub Scouts. It is falling apart. But I think from a town's perspective, Bear Cove wants to do a great thing and like reuse the entire back of it. So we're in a good spot of if we can invest a little, we actually get to leverage our current assets. We're not going to throw something away that works. So again, I wanted to highlight like that's a great use of coming up with a creative solution to fix a really big need and problem while still rolling forward. So next picture. Okay, so this is at the library. This is their chiller unit. It's over 20 years old. So not only is this a big piece of machinery in the library, like the library is our safety center for when it's hot out, right? So residents sort of doubles down on why this can't fail. The interesting part about this is it needs to go out the door about the size of here. So not only are these like expensive pieces of machinery, there's a lot of engineering challenges that the staff are thinking about in advance and really scheduling out. So we're not like rushing to do that. So fire turnout gear, always critical. The town's done a great job getting some grants for some of this in the past. We're all considering these have PFAS in them, so there's a lot of work in the fire service thinking about safer materials to create turnout gear for our firefighters. But this is what we have this year. The 4x4 is a new request, so it's replacing a grant that we received a number of years ago. The key piece on why this is needed is right now you can't put a stretcher in the back and carry the requisite number of firefighters to care for someone if they've got a severe back injury. Obviously, our trails in Wampatuck get a ton of use. We also Landmine Classic in September, so really key that we can respond if someone's in need, if they get injured using our parks and trails and stuff around town. Okay. So on the police side, we continue, usually on an annual basis, buy 5 to 7 vehicles to replace those. I know last year there was some discussion in this meeting about the move back to gasoline. So just share, we will be getting all gasoline vehicles again, moving back away from hybrids. But I did want to share this drone photo. So one of the requests this year from Chief Jones was for some new drones to replace drones we currently have. They're a little bigger. They can operate in all weather conditions. And this is a picture of an individual they were able to find along the water who's in distress. They're not only used to find individuals in town, but we do assist other jurisdictions with police operations, as well as keeping everyone safe for outdoor festivals like Christmas in the Square and the parade. So certainly, hopefully something we don't need to use. But again, the ask from the chief for this particular number gets us 4 of them. So I think it's a good use of our funds there. And then the last one, DPW, and I'll invite members of the committee to speak up if they want to join in, but it's just like a representative picture of the rust and corrosion that's going on in the vehicles. It was amazing to see all of the workshop space that's behind the glass where you get your dump sticker and the hard work that's going on to keep these vehicles on the road. The one in particular that we looked at was the salt spreader that clears the roads, especially over in Crow Point. It throws salt in front of the rear wheels, which just accelerates the corrosion of that vehicle. So certainly want to think about making sure that we're not trying to replace apples with oranges if stuff goes down. So, and Steve or Ted or George, I don't know if you guys want to chime in with anything? Nope? Okay. So just from the fund balance, we wanted to be very transparent on sort of the asks from the departments that we're asking you to spend unassigned fund balance on. These are the heavy machinery items from both the transfer station and DPW and their associated costs. The street sweeper that's been on there since 2017, my first year. That's over 20, coming up to 15 years old there. So these are old vehicles that we have always deferred because they're big ticket items, and we are running up against protection equipment for our police and firefighters. But if we don't fix this and purchase these items, we're going to be in a tough spot. So that sort of sums up to the 1.6. Next slide. So as I said, I wanted to come back to this slide and sort of look at what the department's asks have been from a tax levy and capital stabilization fund perspective and what we've been actually able to provide in the past. So the pink bars are the same ones you saw earlier. The purple bars are what we funded in the past for fiscal 24 and 25. As you can see, it's on the lower end towards the 3% range. For 26, so a recommendation of the tax levy plus some unassigned fund balance. And then you can see on the out years, we're going to have to do some work to make sure we're meeting all of the requests that are coming in from departments that are looking for tax levy funding. Okay. And so what happens if we decide not to fund these additional projects with unassigned fund balance? We obviously will have to cut back from allocations to departments. Our committee considered which projects specifically we would have to cut back and fund, and we sort of listed the variance on there for those departments. Obviously, we've tried to, not spread it across, but it really impacts everyone. It's, one less police cruiser for the police department. It's, potentially not a boiler at an elementary school that's needed. Town hall parking lot won't get done. So we really think it's important not to cut the funding this year and spend that fund balance. Okay. And so last, we just wanted to, reiterate that the 3.5 million that has, was added to with the override in 24 and sort of the additional 100,000 that is forecast going forward is not going to meet the needs of the department requests going forward if we don't start funding at a higher clip. This year we're hopefully in a good position that we'll be able to address most of department's requests. But if not, that'll just get added to next year's request. And as I shared, the out years continue to go up each year. And so that's just going to exacerbate itself going forward. So I want to thank George for putting together the schedule at the fiscal 30, sort of showing what our unfunded balance would be. Okay. And so looking ahead, there's a lot of large numbers on this page, but I think it's important for everyone to realize these aren't getting smaller, and there's a lot on here that don't have solid figures. So obviously I know there's the Center Active Living projects out there, the wharf, consideration of what the town's going to do there. I know there's some warrant articles for roofs, not only at the high school this year, but our elementary schools in the upcoming years. HVAC systems are required at a number of town properties. Fire station considerations, boilers, dredging, solar projects. So it's great that we have all this going on, but they're big numbers, and we want to make sure that we're sharing that out with all of the voters to make sure they're aware of this, as well as properly funding it and not kicking the can down the road. Okay. And last, I just want to call attention to something that the committee has put in its report the last couple of years. Obviously, as we stand here today, there's a lot of requests for roofs and HVAC systems. We've been advocating for a comprehensive sort of building report that would incorporate all of the needs on a longer term basis for all of the buildings so that we could, as a town, effectively purchase services, products, think about, probably scheduling this so we can sort of avoid having 3 projects come to, market at the same time, for lack of a better term. So hopefully that we will consider doing that. I know in the past there was a warrant article sort of asking to put that into place. That hasn't happened yet. So just want to continue to reiterate. I think it's really important, especially as we look at those big numbers on the page, a lot of which are driven from buildings in town. I think that's it. So that's all we had prepared. Sort of happy to take questions. And I don't know if George, Ted, or Steve, you guys want to add anything before we open it up?
I think you did a great job.
Thanks. Lindsay, do you have anything to add?
No, I think that covered it, and happy to jump in on questions if there are questions.
Great. So I'm going to focus on the very first slide and then the very last slide. The very first slide really talked about your mission.
Yep.
And at least from my perspective, if we pull it up, the mission, there it is talk about scheduling capital outlays. And to what extent does your committee actually present a schedule? In other words, this is what's anticipated this year, next year, next year. And towards the end, you sort of had projections going out. Were those projections based on what would happen if we didn't fund the current projects, or were they also projections for future projects?
So those are you talking about the out years?
Yes, the out
Okay.
years.
So the way the committee works is sort of each department presents their asks for this year as well as the 5 years. And we sum that up for the out years. We sort of roll, once it's sort of decided what that is, we assume that they're all going to follow through. And if we don't purchase an item this year, it'll have to be purchased next year. We do account for inflation the best we can, but some of the project swing costs are not accounted for that. So, yeah, so those are all coming from the departments. We're not necessarily proposing, have you thought about X amount in an out year like
But
that.
just so an example, so if a department wanted $2 million and the funding, they wanted $2 million this year and $3 million the following year. And this year, instead of 2 million, we did 1. Does that mean that the out year now shows 4 instead of 3?
Well, yeah, we'll roll that forward.
Okay.
Yes.
Got it. Because I think the ability to look ahead and schedule capital outlays is critical. So we're not approving something for a particular department, not knowing what's coming up in the out years.
Yeah, and I think that's, Joe, that's really why I called out fiscal 28. So
Right.
last year, when we sat here, it was $12.2 million less than it is today.
Yep.
Right, so as the things change, we are incorporating that. I think every department has done a great job of sort of trying to cull their list from last year and say, are those projects still valid? Do we need to consider that? What do we have to put on there for consideration? Yeah, that's what we're doing.
When you are looking at capital outlay costs, to what extent are you factoring in grants or other funding opportunities so the money doesn't necessarily come from the town?
Yeah. So most departments sort of are doing that on their own. So I'll call out the great work that Harbor Master, Police and Fire are doing to, whether that's a port security grant, something from Homeland Security, getting that we can offset those costs. So in the past, when we have received a grant for something that maybe we've already funded, that just rolled back in. So departments are pursuing grants pretty aggressively. Obviously, in the current environment, it's probably going to be a bit more challenging. But departments are doing that, and they do present that. And if we have funding that's available, we don't consider that and sort of subtract that off the top.
So you do not subtract it off?
We do.
You do. So if the school department is going to propose something and they are also going to go for funding, not sure if it's coming in, how is that shown in the projection?
I'd have to get a specific example for a school, but I can call
Any department.
Yeah, so Bear Cove Park's a great one. So I talked about the Ford Ranger we're going to potentially replace. So that vehicle's actually just under 60 grand. They have available funds of 35,000. So we netted that out. So the project cost is 25 that we're putting in the budget.
So, but was there a grant opportunity for that?
I think they had already had some funds from.
Right. So I'm talking about new project.
Oh, okay.
And we know that there are state opportunities available. We'll have to go through the application process. We don't know if we're going to get it. How does that factor into your projections?
Yep. So I'll talk about the fireboat. It's a perfect
Sure.
example there, right? So Chief Murphy, was asking for $200,000 for a community match for a grant that he would like to apply for. Challenge is you need to have the money on hand to apply for the grant. So if you win it,
Right.
you can get it. So that's one where we looked at and said, there's a grant that we would like to apply for. We need to sort of allocate funds to do that. It didn't meet the threshold at the moment. It's sort of like Project 1A, unfortunately. But we do incorporate that and sort of ask, what are the opportunities? I know when Ken was talking about some of the projects he wanted for the Harbor Master. there's waterways funds. He's done a great job asking for grants. We asked sort of a status for where those are. So we do ask. We're not necessarily recommending departments go in search of grants. I don't have that knowledge. So we're sort of relying on them to do that beforehand.
So if there's a project that's going to cost $2 million, there's a grant opportunity for $1 million, we're not sure we're going to get it. Your budget shows the $2 million. Is that correct?
If it depends sort of how the grant is set up. So for the fireboat,
Yep.
we didn't have 750 in there. We had a 200 that we were considering. For another project, depending on the year,
Got it.
we might do that. So
Okay.
it is somewhat dependent.
Okay. And then I'll ask a more mundane question. To what extent do you look at trade-in values when you turning in a vehicle? We bought it for 100,000, maybe it's worth 20 now.
Yep. So the departments, or when they come and talk about a vehicle, so sort of share what the mileage is, condition, why they need to replace it. We do ask about trade-in value. Obviously, I think I've advocated for sort of moving vehicles around, and this year we're actually able to do that. So we're able to repurpose vehicle from one department to
Right.
another to actually fulfill the request. So we ask about that. Obviously, trade-in market, depending on what type of vehicle it is, varies. But I think the town does a good job thinking about the smartest way to turn those in. And sometimes we might get a request from a department of want to replace like vehicle 12, but trade-in value for that is different, and we trade a different one in. It's actually a better deal for the town. So departments do a good job for that, but a lot of them are beat up, and salvage is low. But any funds we do get go into the capital stabilization fund, which we then can use for other projects.
Got it. Just one other point I want to note is, and I'm sure you're aware that there's a lag. We place an order for a vehicle, sometimes it'll come in 2.5 years. So what you may have as a capital request for 1 year may go unfunded just because the vehicle's not available.
Correct. Yeah, and we've seen that mostly with light to mid pickup trucks. Coming out of COVID, that was a big challenge.
Yes.
That's less of a problem for some of the DPW vehicles, which you asked Randy about. So there's a little less demand for some of the heavy pickup trucks. So those are more readily available. But I think stuff is on average 6 to 9 month lag from when we can place the orders.
Great.
So.
Liz?
Thank you. Well, thank you, Mike, for your leadership and the committee's work. This is a great report. I appreciate you took a holistic view and a forward-looking view this year and visited the sites. I think that's an important part of the process, so thank you for taking the extra time to do that. I'd love to see, in addition to the FY26 to FY30 is a 10-year capital plan. I think that's what we really need as a town, to your point, looking at those big projects that are coming down the pike for us. So, and you mentioned the comprehensive report. What is needed to do that report? I think you mentioned an appropriation.
That's a report at the end that you...
Yeah. So, I mean, our view is always, as a committee, we don't have the knowledge of all the systems that may be failing. So think about it. You buy a new house, right? You know something, and then you live there for a while, wow, there's all the stuff that you need to replace. So, this year, when we're, hearing from all the challenge, all the work that has to be done on the high school roof to sort of preserve that asset, that was, that's sort of been known, but it would be good to have that. Plus there's 3 other schools that need roofs, and there's probably roofs here. So just actually having a better understanding of what that entails. Are there ways that we as a town can think about buying or doing stuff in bulk? And so even though it's a larger, right, to put 2 projects together, it's maybe more now, but is that actually a better process? I'm not sure. I don't know how to answer, but thinking about from a system replacement as we're rolling stuff to green or LED, all these new technologies, is there a better order of operations to ensure that we're not undoing work 3 years down the road from a town building perspective?
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And I think there's a lot of value in doing that. One, to understand preventative maintenance townwide, as well as just the capital planning that we'd like to get better at. So just wondering if you have any idea, what
I don't know
how
what
big of an effort
I don't know
this
what
is.
it looks
Is there a
like. I don't know
dollar
what it looks-
amount?
Yeah, I don't know
Okay.
what it looks like.
Okay.
Obviously, there's a ton of expertise that we were able to witness this year, going to all of the different building sites, and so I don't know how the town is collecting that sort of knowledge, tribal knowledge, because as people retire or move on or whatnot, we don't want to lose that. But it seems like there's a lot of systems that require some loving touch from individuals to keep going, which is great, but want to make sure that that's not our plan going forward. So.
I totally agree. The funds
Excuse me, Liz, could I just jump in on that topic? You may recall that I believe it's 2019 town meeting actually approved funds for a study of the town buildings to determine, systems needs, maintenance needs, that sort of thing going forward. I think that would be a good place to start with that kind of analysis. The money allocated may not be sufficient at this time. It's been a number of years since it was allocated, but I think as a first step, that would be a good use of money that's already been approved by the town.
Agreed. Okay, excellent, thank you. And the capital stabilization fund, is that represented here as one of the funding sources?
We included it in the COC allocation with taxes. So instead of the 3.5 million from taxes, you see 3.53, it was $30,000 this year.
Okay. Okay, got it. Okay, thank you. Okay, no other questions right now. Thank you.
Great. I will turn it over to the advisory committee.
Great. Advisory committee members, does anyone have questions for capital outlay this time? Al?
On that point, on the cap stabilization fund versus unfunded balance, what you see was 30,000 from capital. So what does that leave with in there? Or how was why was a small amount there versus?
Because there's only 32,000.
That was sort of another way to ask it. Was
Yes. Well, and on that note, that's not really a reserve to build up. It was meant to augment this budget, so it's something that we think should be used every year to do a few more little projects or kind of, get a little bit more of a capital infusion in there.
Yeah.
There's two more.
Brenda?
I have heard talk, and I'm sorry I don't know the details, about multiple projects. I've heard talk, but don't know the details about multiple projects that need to be done at the high school. Roof, heating system, HVAC maybe, and solar. Are these envisioned to be done together, since they all relate to the roof, or what's the plan?
Yep. So that's something that we asked about, specifically sort of the order operations on the HVAC and the roof at the high school, just given that the magnitude, I think the roof's 14 and HVAC over 4 years is 16 million, so like 30 million in total. They're working on, I don't have all the specifics on sort of the best plan to do that, and some of that is dependent on the sort of survey work that needs to be done to sort of understand that. But that is the figures that the school committee shared with us. I don't know if they want to add any perspective on that, but those are over a number of years. I don't know what the best way to do that is, but it's how it's broken out.
So we have gone through the process.
You have a mic?
Yep. We have gone through the process over the last few weeks in terms of, we've been working with the engineers, Habib and Associates, and we're, as part of the article review, we're pulling together some of that information as well. And we've been meeting with the town managers, and we're hoping to, by next week, have some answers in terms of our advisory presentation on the article to provide a clearer vision of what that looks like. Okay, so yes, we're looking at everything and trying to figure out the best formula in terms of, because right now, the way it stands right now is that we do have the roofs, the solar aspect of it, and we do have RTUs, or rooftop units. As part of that, there are also like the backnet or the software that manages a heating system within those buildings as well that are failing. We have had failures at South School, where the age of those heating systems are about exactly the same as the high school. The high school ones are working, but with problems. So we're looking at the best formula in terms of what needs to happen for those as well, being conscious of the cost and what we think we'll be able to get through town meeting as well.
Just as a follow-up, I mean, at the moment, the proposal is that all of those projects get funded, right, with this plan.
That does not,
no.
no.
That was only the projects from tax levy.
Okay.
So the roof and any future HVAC would be probably warrant articles, since they'd be significantly higher than the tax levy. They are captured in the 5-year plan that we shared out from all the departments. So
It just seems like a place where we should be thinking of putting the different pieces together. 'Cause it's
Right,
all having the same hardware, the same
Yep.
roof. Right?
yeah.
But it's not covered as part of this here. It's part of the separate articles that we'll have to analyze and look at. Okay.
Do you have other AdCom members with any questions? I just have a quick one.
Sure,
Since starting on the advisory committee, I have heard about the DPW deferred trucks and how it causes people sleepless nights in the town. And I just wanted to ask, of the trucks that you're replacing, are they all level 1 requests?
Yes, from the DPW.
Yes.
Yeah. So Randy's done a great job uploading all the vehicles that they will need to have replaced into ClearGov. So there's a nice record for us to look at. Some of those go out, can be past 2030, but they're all in there. He only asked for stuff that he thought we might be able to fund this year, just given the historical sort of deferral cycle that he has been in. And so the things that he's asked for this year are really things that need to get replaced, both from a transfer station perspective as well as DPW.
Okay, thank you. I think
I'd also add in there, Mike, that from our visits to DPW, these vehicles were in some of the worst condition of, anything we saw across the town. And they're some of the most important vehicles for kind of day-to-day operations and, safety and management of the town. So the need here was really clear when we went and visited and saw what they were working with.
Thank you, Lindsay.
From a repair standpoint, I mean, the time that some of these vehicles are spent in the shop and the money that it's costing to fix them up and keep them on the road, it'd almost be, it's like one of them was like a quarter of the cost of a new vehicle was spent on repairs, for example. Just the deferred maintenance is brutal. I don't know. That's long story short, what I want to say. Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah.
I think that's it from the advisory committee.
School committee.
Thank you very much for the presentation. We appreciate you coming and doing a field trip. I think it's very helpful for you to see what's happening in the schools. Certainly you can't look at all of it in one night. So I appreciate you and your team pulling this together and your thoughtful presentation. Anybody on the school committee have any questions? Nope. Not seeing any. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Ness.
Right, so I know that you've gotten input from the departments and you've given us a report. Any additional information that would assist you in finalizing this, or is this final?
I mean, this is final. We sort of wanted to share our unique approach from departure of past years where we sort of limited ourselves to the tax levy, and capital stabilization fund is a nice little infusion, and using ambulance receipts to sort of supplement not only ambulance purchase, but also some of the gear for the fire department is great. But our recommendation is we need to go above and beyond this year and sort of, I want to say stop the bleeding, but stop the cycle that we're in of deferring things that are big. There's still going to be a need next year, and it's probably going to cost more. Yep. So our recommendation is to not only spend the tax levy, but also consider unassigned fund balance for the vehicles that we outlined.
Yeah, I think that's right. And there's one additional factor, which is not necessarily in your purview, but it's in all of our purviews, is employee morale. What's it like going to work for using equipment that fails? And to the extent that the town is sometimes at a loss for attracting employees, retaining employees, having things that work really helps. So I appreciate not only from a capital and a financial perspective, but I think from an employee perspective, having things up to snuff. So thank you.
Thank you.
I'm prepared to move forward then with the next item, unless there's anything else you wanted to add.
That's it. I guess I have to adjourn the capital outlay committee meeting.
Could I?
Sorry, George.
Yeah, I just want to bring up a slightly different topic because it kind of has to do with next year, and I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves. But Michelle, if you could bring up slide 19, please. All right, so I just wanted to spend a brief moment on this because, as I say, it really pertains to next year. But if we take a look at the second line from the bottom, the COC budget per forecast, sometime around 2016-17, we as a town recognized that the budget for COC was insufficient, and so we started adding $100,000 a year to the budget. At the time, the COC budget was somewhere around $2 million. So that was about a 5% increase in annual spending, a pretty decent increase. COC budget now up over $3.5 million. That $100,000 is less than 3%. So it's less than the revenue growth of the town, and it's less than the operating budget increases for the town. So unless we change that formula going forward, we're soon going to find ourselves spending less than 3% of the operating budget on capital improvements via the levy. So I just ask you to keep that in mind as we go forward. Obviously, we don't change it for this year's budget, but it's something we need to keep in mind. Thank you, Mike. Thank you.
Yeah, can you just go up one slide, Michelle? Yeah, so I think this is reiterates the challenge that we're in of we're going to be slowly below the yellow line and drowning. Thank you, George. Okay, so we'll make a motion to close the capital outlay committee.
So moved. Second.
Okay, roll call vote.
Aye.
Aye. Steve? Aye. Lindsay?
Aye.
Okay, I'm aye as well. It's over. Thank you all for your time. Appreciate
Thank you.
it.
Good job, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. I was about to say we have our work cut out for us, but you've carved the path for us, so thank you.
Joe, may I also adjourn the school committee?
Yes,
Yeah, I will accept.
we love having you here.
All those in favor, Michelle? Aye. Ally? Jen?
Aye.
Carrie?
Aye.
Tim?
Aye.
And I'm an aye as well. Thank you.
Great.
Thank you.
Good to see you.
See you.
We will adjourn for a minute so that you can leave and recess. I'm sorry. We'll recess.
We will reconvene upstairs in our room.
The select board meeting is now continuing. Next item on our agenda is to consider the removal of certain warrant articles from the 2025 annual town meeting warrant. First one is Article GG, Communications for Route 3A project. I'm going to ask our town administrator to give a very brief explanation. Both Liz and I have been informed in various meetings as to why these are being removed, but for the record, we'll just do a quick summary.
So the communications for the Route 3A project, we anticipate needing this money more next year. There's some preliminary work that will happen, but we don't think we need a full communications budget for this year.
Given the scheduling of work, it seems that while communications are important, this funding need is not for the upcoming fiscal year.
That's right.
Yes. Liz, any questions?
No questions.
Then we'll move on to Article KK, the Notice of Town Meeting Warrant.
So this article was intending to not send a warrant to every address in town. I think that this is a little bit of a history in Hingham where people enjoy getting their warrant in the mail, and to that extent, I think that this might have been not quite ready for prime time, and perhaps is something we could consider in the future, but probably not this year.
Yeah, I mean, I think this was not ready for prime time. There's a question about whether it's an opt-out or an opt-in procedure.
That's right.
The budget savings, while it's important, was not significant. And so I'm comfortable moving forward with that removal. Liz, anything?
I'm comfortable moving forward with removing it for this year. I would like to keep it on the list for FY '27. I do think it's something we should consider and figure out how to best do this while engaging people to come
Yes.
to town meeting.
Hopefully in a way that encourages and increases participation
Exactly.
at town meeting. Moving on to the next article, which is NN, the Town and School Roof Study, Capital Planning.
So this is an article that was submitted by the Hingham Light Board, Municipal Light Board. We've in conversations with them, we've determined that we would be able to get a good portion of this work done through external funding, through a grant that will allow us to get the initial benefits of this kind of a project completed through non-municipal funds. So with that said, I suggest we pull this article and use the grant funds for next year. And to the extent that we need to do this going forward, if grant money becomes unavailable, then we could do that for future years.
Yeah, and I'm comfortable with this. Michelle? Liz, sorry.
I am as well. And just to be clear, we're talking about grants for solar on roofs. This has nothing
That's
to
right.
do with the conversation we just had about
That's
roof and
right.
school maintenance.
Okay.
Yep.
And then finally, Article B, Tree Protection Standards and Definitions. I believe this was submitted by the Planning Board.
That's right. This was contemplated by the planning board, submitted, and subsequently withdrawn by them.
Okay. So the Planning Board has asked for this to be withdrawn. I'm comfortable with their assessment. Liz?
I am too.
Any member of the public with comments or questions on this item, Articles GG, KK, NN, and BBB? Seeing none, I'm prepared to take a motion.
I'll make a motion to remove the following warrant articles from the 2025 annual town meeting warrant and to send notice of said removal to the advisory committee. Article GG, Communications for Route 3A Project. Article KK, Notice of Town Meeting Warrant. Article NN, Town and School Roof Study, Capital Planning. Article BBB, Tree Protection Standards and Definitions.
I'll second that motion. Roll call vote. Liz?
Aye.
And I'm an aye as well. It's approved. Move on to item number 8 on our agenda, discussion and possible votes on the 2025 annual town meeting warrant articles. We'll begin with Article Q, Town Election Voting Hours. And I believe we have Carol Falvey here, our illustrious town clerk.
Good evening.
Good evening.
How's everybody doing tonight?
Doing well.
Excellent. So the last I was here, I had proposed an article to shorten the Saturday hours for the local town election by 2 hours to finish up at 6 p.m. And I think I presented evidence of peer communities that do it, that the advent of early voting and the popularity in Hingham was a reason that, close to 50% of Hingham prefers to vote that way. We're also going to save some money, which is always a good thing. And I've been before you, I have shared my notice or information about the warrant article in my weekly town clerk update. The Hingham Anchor has written an article about it. I have reached out to both the Democratic and Republican town committees to let them know about it and to say if they wanted to weigh in, to reach you all, and here we are. So I look at this proposal not as taking something away, because I feel that when the hours were created 30 years ago, we actually have twice as many opportunities for people to vote today. By voting by mail, it's safe, it's secure, people like doing it in their homes, they like the privacy. So here I am before you, asking you to vote to support my article.
So I've gotten the comments from various folks who have seen what you've said, and they are unanimous in supporting this proposal.
Okay.
I think there are alternative voting opportunities. To say that we're not taking something away is not quite right. We are taking away something, but we're taking away something that is really of no value. the value is actually replaced by other means of voting. So while I was initially hesitant about moving forward, I think the due diligence that you've done has really assisted me in coming forward to support this. Liz?
Great. Well, thank you, Carol, for being here. Thank you for the outreach that you did and being patient with the process. I also reviewed the comments. We did receive several emails in support of this. So I feel comfortable now that the public has been notified and had a chance to weigh in. So I'm comfortable moving forward with this.
Any member of the public, comments or questions? Seeing none, I'm prepared to take a motion.
I will make a motion to recommend favorable action on Article Q.
Second, roll call vote, Liz.
Aye.
And I'm an aye as well. Approved.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you for being
Appreciate
here.
your support.
Thank you.
Next, we have Article N, transfer harbor revenues to Municipal Waterways Improvement and Maintenance Fund. Is Ken on the line? There he is.
Yes, good evening.
Good to hear you. Are we going to see you?
Unfortunately, the computer I'm at doesn't have a camera.
Okay. But we know it's you. I recognize your voice. Okay, so if you can just give us a very brief rundown on this transfer.
Yeah, so this transfer would transfer various revenues that are generated from the Harbor Master's Office from the general fund to the Waterways Maintenance Fund. These revenues would include, parking license for the purpose of accessing slips or moorings, general revenues created by the Harbor Master's Office, as well as 50% of boat excise tax that's not already deposited into the Waterways Fund.
Tom, anything?
No, we've done this in the past several times. I think it's a good practice. We are using the Waterways Fund in more creative ways with regards to supporting the operations of the town, and I think that this is an appropriate step.
Yes. Liz, any questions?
Thank you, Ken. My only question, more procedural, will AdCom's recommendation have the dollar amounts?
AdComs will have the estimated ones because this will really be everything at the end of FY25. So it's kind of like a June 30th transfer.
Okay.
So the exact amounts right now won't be known.
Okay. And in terms of the amount for local receipts that we have in the forecast, that's reflected based on this, correct?
I'll make sure that it is in the next forecast update. Typically, we have it would really affect the boat excise tax line, removing the other 50% there, but it's a pretty small number.
Okay. Excellent. No other questions. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Any member of the public, comments or questions on this? Hearing none, I'll accept the motion.
I'll make a motion to recommend favorable action on Article N.
Second, roll call vote, Liz.
Aye.
And I'm an aye as well. It's approved. Move on to Article II, the South Shore Country Club authorization to borrow for equipment and renovations.
Kevin may be presenting his budget to AdCom right now. Could
So we
come
may
back to
just
this?
defer. I
He just
looked up,
left.
I saw him here a minute ago. Okay, so we will then move on to Article MM, Home Rule Petition, Alternative Methods for Publication of Legal Notices. Mr. Mayo.
Sure. So this is an article that contemplates our ability to post not meeting agendas, but the legal notices required by several different Mass General laws that boards and committees are required to notify the public of their actions. So right now we post these things in the backs of the Patriot Ledger, or on occasion the Boston Globe, or the whatever local newspaper we feel is going to get fulfill the requirement and get the information out to the public. But the printed papers are becoming harder and harder to find that can accommodate that. The timing and scheduling of getting these notices in the papers is very difficult, and the expenses are increasing annually. So what this article does is it frankly takes a little bit of the concept from some other municipalities across the state that have been doing this, and moves away from the printed paper, but allows us to publish legal notices on digital media. So there's, a couple of different ways to do this. I think we've discussed it, but I think that's the general idea.
So I think publishing notices in an inefficient way is not a practice we should continue. And I think this is a good step to move us in the right direction, making sure that the notices actually are available and reached by those who need to see them, and done in a way that is efficient from a cost standpoint. So we have two alternatives, and I'm not sure we have.
Took the second one and added on electronic version.
Right. So, one.
The end of section.
Yeah, I understand. So what we're considering is the town of Hingham may publish said legal notices on the bulletin board outside the town clerk's office in written or electronic format. And it says in a local newspaper in either electronic or paper format. I'm not sure we're wedded to the local newspaper because, for example, the Hingham Anchor is not a newspaper arguably.
So the discussion around the state is that if we say a local newspaper, which is an undefined medium right now in the world, in technology world, and we're saying that we would post it in a local newspaper in either electronic or paper format. So we could post to, for instance, the Hingham Anchor would be a local newspaper in electronic format.
So I would prefer if it said in a local news media rather than a newspaper, which sort of suggests paper.
Just so you know, the reason we use this language is it passed through the AG through another town.
Oh, it did.
But you can change it as needed, as you see fit, obviously. But I just wanted to let you know, we were trying to make sure we use language that the AG had previously
So
passed.
the AG said that a website-only news outlet is considered a newspaper. I just want to make sure.
They passed this language as it's written.
But it was for a media that was not also available in print.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. I asked John Coughlin, town council, that question.
Okay.
And that's what he said.
Liz, any thoughts?
Have you received any feedback on this
Nope.
since we heard it last time?
Nope.
Okay. So, and obviously this wouldn't prevent us from putting it in the paper format if we
Correct.
chose to or
That's
thought
right.
that it was warranted. So I'm comfortable with this.
Just to be clear, I think we're recommending the updated version.
Right. Well, no,
So-
we actually may not.
Oh, we're not, oh, sorry.
Just in front of-
So it doesn't really, okay.
in front of bulletin board, just put electronic.
Right, so. So what we're talking about, just so I'm clear, is the town may publish a legal notice on the bulletin board outside the town clerk's office in either print or electronic format. Was that clear enough that?
That was what we had discussed, and then
Right.
we had this
Right, so
alternative.
I think the idea of basically having a TV screen where these notices flow through. So maybe on a bulletin board or electronic screen, just be clear about it. Or electronic screen. So may publish the legal notice on a bulletin board or electronic screen outside the town clerk's office and in a local newspaper in either electronic or paper format, as long as we're clear that that means an online source that is not available in print, as well as one that is in print, or on the town's website. For the purposes of this section, the term website shall mean the official website of the town of Hingham that is operated and maintained by the town's municipal government. I'm comfortable with that. Are you?
Yes.
Any comments from members of the public? So with that language, I am prepared to accept the motion.
I will make a motion to amend Article MM with the form attached hereto and recommend favorable action on Article MM as amended.
Second, roll call vote. Liz?
Aye.
And I'm an aye as well. So,
We'll update the article language and send
right.
that.
Do we know what Kevin's schedule is?
I don't.
Text it in, but he's the first budget.
Oh,
in
okay.
AdCom.
Okay, so we'll just proceed. Next, we move to Article L, acceptance and granting of easements.
So this is an article we had heard a few weeks ago. The discussion at the board was whether or not to include in the traditional acceptance of easements article over on an annual basis, the concept of being able to grant easements as well. There have been some discussion about whether or not we wanted to narrow that scope to be utility work on town properties or not. This is the original language, but we can amend it as you see fit.
So I'm the one who addressed that concern. My concern is to make sure that we preserve for town meeting, that the warrant does not usurp from town meeting their authority to approve conveyances of town property. But I think as it's written, which is, will the town authorize but not require the select board to grant and to accept grants of easements for streets, water drainage, sewer, and utility purposes, or any other public purpose on terms and conditions. I think that's acceptable.
Great.
Liz, are you?
I'm comfortable with that.
Okay.
And I'll ask the same question, Tom. Have you received any feedback on this?
We have
since
not.
Last heard it? Okay.
Nope.
And is there precedent, or have other towns done this?
I haven't asked John that. I'm not sure. Not that I'm aware of. John Coughlin might be aware of any, but I haven't asked him that question.
I think this came up in the context of the Foster School.
Yeah, there was a utility easement that needed to be granted over there, and it turned out we were able to do it a different way, but if we hadn't been able to, it could have delayed the project.
Okay. I'm comfortable.
And am I correct that this is a authorization for one fiscal year only?
That's right.
So that this is not ongoing, and then we'll hopefully make sure that it's done. We'll see how it works over the year. Any comment from members of the public? Seeing none, I'm prepared to accept the motion.
I will make a motion to recommend favorable action on Article L.
Second, roll call vote. Liz?
Aye.
I'm an aye as well. It's approved. We move to Article I, Building Department Revolving Fund. Michelle?
Sure. So we are coming back. This is a perennial article to set the expenditure cap for the building department revolving fund. When we looked more closely at the budget, we need to put $50,000 out of the building revolving fund and back on the general fund because we've been basically hitting it too hard for the last few years. We needed to do that for several years to get the balance down, and it took some pressure off the tax levy and the operating budget. But now to make sure that there's a sufficient balance to keep moving forward, we are recommending for FY26 that the expenditure cap would be set at $255,000.
And Michelle, am I correct that the building revolving fund is used to pay salaries of inspectors there?
Yes, sorry, I should have mentioned that this fund is fed with all the fees related to gas,
Right.
plumbing, and electrical inspections, and still funds 100% of the gas, plumbing, and electrical inspector salaries, but now funds a much smaller percent of the building commissioner's salary and does not fund the administrative assistants any further because we're not able to sustain those expenditures.
Got it.
This is something, though, we'll reevaluate every year. I know that the building commissioner did raise the fees through town meeting maybe a year or two ago. So next year we'll do a reanalysis, of how the revenue is trending, how the permits are trending, and we'll see if we can make any shifts kind of back into the fund at that time.
Got it. Liz, any questions?
So I just have a question about the dollar amount. Maybe I'm not reading this correctly, but the note says 255. $255,000.
Yeah, so when we wrote the article, we used the cap from last year. And last year, the article was similar. It was a higher cap and then a lower recommended motion. Certainly, if the board would like, we can update the article to reflect the same, the $255,000, but the recommended motion should cap it at $255,000. So it's an easy update if you want us to just change it so it's clear in the question itself.
Yeah, in other words, you can do it here, or you can have AdCom do it for you in the motion.
Well, so I think Liz's point is, it looks like we have $1 figure here, and why would we have a different one in the motion?
Yeah,
We
so
just
let's-
know,
we
we know
can
the
update
number
it.
now. Sometimes we don't know it at the.
Okay, so in this case, we should
Let's
go with,
update it.
we should update it.
Amend it.
Sure.
Yes.
Thank you.
Comments from members of the public? So Liz, are you prepared for motion here?
Yes. I will make a motion to amend Article I and recommend favorable action on Article I as amended.
Second, roll call vote, Liz,
Aye.
and I'm an aye as well. Next item is Article BB, the Recreation Department Revolving Fund. Michelle?
Sure. So similar to the way that we have the Building Department Revolving Fund and the Center for Active Living Revolving Fund, we have a Recreation Department Revolving Fund that was established under a different statute many decades ago. And that statute is now a bit outdated. So we're proposing to reestablish the Recreation Department Revolving Fund under MGL Chapter 44, Section 53, E and a half. I love when they do halves, which is a more modern way of operating the fund, and it's more in line with our current practices. This is something that Mark Threll and I checked with DOR about. We looked at another option, like could rec be an enterprise fund, but that type of fund is not available to these types of operations. Those are more for standalone rec facilities. So this is an article that would draft a bylaw outlining the uses of the fund, which again is similar to how the fund is currently being managed, to receive the fees associated with rec programs, to pay expenditures associated with those programs for staff, for capital, for other things. And then similar to the other two funds that I just mentioned, every year there'd be a new perennial article establishing the expenditure cap for the rec revolving fund for the coming fiscal year. If for some reason we needed to exceed that cap, that would be a vote of the select board and AdCom, so you don't have to go back to town meeting just in case there were additional expenditures in a particular year. And in talking with Mark, they're advising that the recommended cap for FY26 would be somewhere around 2.7 million, just based on last year's programs and activities.
So that's the cap, what's in the fund?
That's the expenditure cap. So the revenue that comes in would support those expenditures
Okay.
going out. Yes.
So this would move to Section 53E and a half from
Yes.
what section?
From section 53D, which when we talked to DOR, they kind of said it was an outdated section. So many towns had already moved their funds over to 53E and a half.
Okay, got it. And you've mentioned several times that you reviewed this with Mark. Mark, did you want to add anything to this?
No, I think Michelle did a great job of summarizing that, yeah.
Okay. Liz, any questions?
Can you just review what you're saying about the recommended cap? So would we
Yes.
review that on an annual basis?
Yes, so similar to the way that for the building revolving fund. So the first time you have to set up kind of the bylaw to be able to do this.
Yes.
And as part of that, in this vote, we're also saying, where is it? And further, will the town vote to blah, 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 and limit the total amount that will be spent during fiscal year 26. Going forward, you'll have a similar article like building that just says, in FY27, will the town limit the expenditures of the rec revolving fund to X in FY27.
Okay.
There is a proposal, it may be in the Municipal Empowerment Act, to get rid of that annual requirement if the cap's not changing, because it's kind of silly, but that hasn't passed yet. So this would become another perennial like Center for Active Living Revolving Fund and building going forward.
Okay. But the rec department would continue to manage that budget with the fees and receipts, what's coming into the fund.
Yes,
correct?
as part of that bylaw, it says the Recreation Commission shall be authorized to expend from said revolving fund the way that they do now. So they would continue to manage their programs, their money, their staff, capital projects, et cetera. It's just kind of, it's more procedural, just reestablishing this. And as one thing that we did include here, we wanted to make sure that we weren't establishing it and not bringing any funds over with it. So anything, any remaining funds in the current revolving fund would move over to the new revolving fund to make sure that they're not somehow getting stuck in an old fund that ceases to exist.
So it looks like conceptually there's two parts, or there's three parts. There's establishing the 53E.5 fund. Second, there's moving over the funds. And is there a third part, which is terminating the prior fund?
I don't know about terminating the prior fund. I can ask John about that. Essentially, you'll have an old fund with no money in it anymore, so I can.
We should find out if
Okay.
if that needs to be terminated.
Okay.
So I think, so this covers the first two. And so if it turns out that we should do the third, we can open up and add language for that.
Okay.
Any member of the public, comments or questions on this? Then I am prepared to accept a motion.
I will make a motion to recommend favorable action on Article BB.
Second, roll call vote. Liz?
Aye.
And I'm an aye as well. Approved. Next on the agenda is the fiscal year 25 Community Preservation Grant Agreements. Julie, come on up. And Emily, do you want to join her? Good to see you both.
Hi.
So please explain what you're presenting.
Hi, I'm Julie Straley. I'm Chair of the Community Preservation Committee, 231 Levitt Street.
Is your mic on? Make sure it
I
is.
think so.
Yes.
Yep.
And what happens every year after the town meeting votes for any community preservation funding, there is a grant agreement that is created between the grantee and the town, which basically lays out what funds are granted and what if there are any stipulations or rules considering for how the grant is paid out. And the idea is to that they have 2 years to spend the grant, and we have 2 from town meeting from last year. One of them is for the playground project.
Right.
And then the other one is for the Affordable Housing Trust Opportunity Fund. They did not get an official grant, but they, part of that article, which we talked about in our meeting last week, was that there were net sale proceeds from the sale of properties that were originally funded by Affordable Housing Trust community preservation grants. So some properties were sold and there was money generated, net sale proceeds that would go back into the Affordable Housing Trust. So a grant agreement that triggered having to have a grant agreement for that.
Okay, so this is, these were approved back at the 2024 annual town meeting.
Yes.
Emily, anything you wanted to add? Okay. Tom?
Nope, I'm good. Thank you. These are all approved last year.
Yep. Liz?
My only question is, did the chair of the Affordable Housing Trust sign the agreement?
Yes, we just received that earlier today, so Sharon has it when it's authorized to be executed by the chair of this board, that's ready to go.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. No other questions.
And Tom, I assume this language has been reviewed and approved by our council.
It has.
Yes. Any member of the public, comments or questions? Seeing none, I'm prepared to accept a motion.
I will make a motion to authorize the chair to execute Community Preservation Committee grant agreements to implement the awards approved pursuant to Article 16 of the 2024 Annual Town Meeting for the Community Playground Project and the Hingham Affordable Housing Trust Opportunity Fund.
Second, roll call vote. Liz?
Aye.
I'm an aye as well. Approved. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
A stack of paper here, Tom. Okay. Next on the agenda is to consider approval of the amendment to the agreement with ProBuilt Designs LLC for project modifications.
Good evening.
Good evening.
So ProBuilt Construction has the contract for the installation of the community playground, including installing all the play equipment, the surfacing, the fencing, and the one thing that it didn't include in the original scope of work was the demo work. We originally had a local construction company who was going to volunteer their services to do the demo work. And for a couple of factors, they ended up pulling out at the last second. And so ProBuilt was able to do this work for the fee of $55,000. And then the second item was kind of the cost associated with the rec commission working with the community and kind of coming up with a plan to provide shade for the playground. And we were able to keep 2 of the existing larger trees and then plant, we're going to plant 6 additional trees outside of the fall zones of the equipment. And working with the designer, we were able to come up with a game plan, which I think will do a great job of providing ample shade throughout the playground. So that's kind of the cost of the $57,000 was the cost of purchasing the trees, installing them, and then also installing the tree grates that go around them. And then the demo work was for $55,000, which included disposal of all the play equipment, chain link fencing, the walkways, digging out the tree stumps and removing about 440 cubic yards of old material.
The agreement provides that all the work would be done no later than June 30th. Are you comfortable that that's a reasonable date?
Yes, yeah.
And that schedule hopefully will not disrupt activities that would otherwise be happening during that time?
Yeah, I mean, normally the playground would be humming in the springtime, so certainly disrupt that. But we're hopeful that it could finish by the time our summer camps start. So I think we're on track to be able to do that.
Liz, any questions?
Thank you, Mark and Vicki. I appreciate you taking these extra steps based on the community feedback on the playground. Just a question on where the budget is coming from.
Sure. So the lion's share of the budget for the whole project is funded by CPC, but because this is going to be over it and above, the rec was able to fundraise some funds and then some funds from our revolving fund. So on this change order, it'll be fully funded by the rec, whether it's revolving funds or money that we fundraise.
Okay, excellent. Well, thank you. No other questions?
So there's a fair amount of publicity in terms of this project, and this is like the finishing touch. So thank you for seeing it through. And I know members of the public are very appreciative.
Thank you.
Great. Any other comments from members of the public? Seeing none, I'm prepared to accept a motion.
I will make a motion to authorize the town administrator to sign the amendment to the agreement with ProBuilt Designs LLC for project modifications in an amount not to exceed $112,000.
Second, roll call vote.
Aye.
Liz?
Aye.
And I'm an aye as well. Yes, I should call the name. That would be nice. Okay.
Thank you.
We are going to
Thank
go,
you.
we're going to go back
Exciting.
because I see our, no.
Kevin?
Yes, I do see Kevin there. About the South Shore Country Club. So we're going to go back to Article II, which is the South Shore Country Club authorization to borrow for equipment and renovations. Thank you for returning from your long trip over to the advisory committee.
I know. Well, thank you for having us. George Kay, who's with me as the chairman of the Country Club Management Committee. In the article, and we're requesting two separate things. One is, the first one is a borrowing of $687,000 for the purpose of purchasing equipment. We purchased equipment in 2019. This would essentially be replacing that equipment. The John Deere, we have 3 fairway mowers, which are kind of getting older and have been somewhat problematic as far as taking care of them. Then we also have 3 greens mowers and then 2 tee boxes and triplexes, they're called, which will mow the tee boxes and approaches, and also 1 small rough mower, which is replacing a 2007 Sidewinder. So the amount that we have is, if we're requesting is $687,000. We should be able to get, when we do purchase it, it will come down as we have trade-in value for all the equipment that we do have. So we're, the amount that we do borrow will be in, but the purchase price is what we're requesting there.
And the source of funds?
The source of funds will be the operational revenues from the golf course. The purchase from 2019 is falling off in FY25 this year, and so we will have next year won't have a payment, and then we'll have a payment beginning again in FY27. But the payments will come out of the operational revenues from the golf course.
Liz, any questions?
My only question is, do we need to specify that it's being repaid by the enterprise fund within the article?
I don't think you necessarily do in the article, and even the motion, it will mostly come out in the comment. Typically, the motion, bond counsel will tell us that everything at the end of the day is general obligation bond backed by the full faith and credit of the town, but we would signal that the plan is to repay it from the country club operating budget.
Okay.
And I know, Kevin, you said this is one piece of it. There's a second piece that also involves an additional borrowing where a piece would come from the country club, but we would make that clear in the comment.
Okay. No other questions?
Tom, this is, I guess, directed to you. What we heard before from the Capital Outlay Committee is sort of coordinating among departments as they purchase various items. Is the country club included so that there's coordination with them? I'm thinking between them, DPW, other departments.
So when we have vehicles that are ready for instance, turn-in or turnover, Kevin and Randy and the chiefs, they all communicate with one another to try to identify where the area of need most is.
Right.
They talk to me. We kind of help direct the allocation.
In the past, we have taken a lot of like DPW equipment that still has a little bit of life left, and we've used it.
Exactly where I'm going, right.
And, this type of equipment is a little bit different in that although the equipment is still usable, it's not really what you use for athletic fields because it's more, cutting the grass down to, you're talking 3/4 of an inch or even a, half inch in some instances.
Okay. Questions or comments from members of the public? Seeing none, I'm prepared to take a motion on Article II.
I will make a motion to recommend favorable action on Article II.
Second, roll call vote, Liz.
Aye.
And I'm an aye as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we move to consider the agreement with Boston Light and Sound for audiovisual services for the 2025 annual town meeting. David.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So what we have here before you tonight is the contract for the audiovisual services for the annual town meeting of 2025. We had requested quotes. We submitted solicitation to qualified vendors back in January in the greater Boston area. On February 11th, we had conducted a site visit at the high school. Basically, we had a quick tour of the gym and the auditorium, and they had to go over the details of the event. And they had an opportunity to submit questions if they had any that we would be able to respond to. The quotes were due on February 13th, and ultimately Boston Light and Sound was the most responsible and responsive, offering the services for what we need at the lowest price quotation. Boston Light and Sound has operated a variety of town meetings in the past, providing municipal references such as the town of Milford, Concord, Norwell, and the town of Hull. And in addition, as you know, Boston Light and Sound has operated our annual town meeting for the past several years and is highly recommended for this year. Query checks will be conducted prior to the meeting by the school department. I've already kind of coordinated that with the contractor and the school. New contract, the term of contract would be until April 30th. And the funding source is the annual town operating budget. And the invoice would be after the completion of the service, of course. And the total price would be $54,171.70. And within the contract, it does state for the 2 nights. As of right now, they're expecting it might be 1 night. We haven't told them that it's 2 nights or not.
And how does that budget figure compare to last year's?
So last year, I believe it was, I think last year we were at 51,000 or so. That was probably about right for the 2, if I remember correctly. So we're hovering right around that, just slightly over 50 for the 2 nights.
So this is the budget for 2 nights, and if it's a 1-night meeting, what happens?
Well, it'd still be the 54,000. We're basically getting charged for both nights because we're reserving the second night. So basically, we're having Boston Light and Sound say, they are going to be here for 2 nights because they can't book another event or another what have you. So unfortunately, even if it was 1 night, the contract would be not to exceed the $54,000.
Were the other contractors the same restriction that basically you commit for 2, even if you don't need to?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll have them come in the next night show and mop the floors.
That's where we gotta do
Do
something.
a show.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. That's
Yeah,
right.
exactly. And there's a definite end date here, and if
Take notice.
the worst possible thing is that town meeting is extended or delayed for reasons beyond our control, sounds like we could not rely on them for a delayed town meeting.
If we had a 3rd night, is that where?
No, I'm saying if, for example, there's a flood or there's who knows
Oh, I
weather
understand.
event, and we can't have town meeting when it's scheduled, it's pushed back
I understand.
to the first weekend of May.
Sure. I mean, at this time, that's with an unforeseen emergency such as that. I mean, I know that clearly we've built a relationship with Boston Light and Sound over the last couple of years, so I think that that's something that if that were to happen, I think that we'd be able to have that conversation rather quickly to see if they could accommodate us.
So is there what would be called a force majeure clause in this agreement that would basically?
I do not believe so. No.
Their problem, Joe, is that if they're going to be available for us, that means they're not available elsewhere for other events, and they bill us for those days. So if we're going to have them available, say the following week, Monday and Tuesday, we would need to pay them for that Monday and Tuesday in
Right.
addition to this Monday.
And I assume John's reviewed this
Yes.
agreement. Okay. No other questions, Liz?
Do you know how this budget compares to some of the other towns, like Concord or Norwell's town meeting?
I don't. I mean, it's a great question. I know that even with some, like where I came before, I know that the school did it. You know, it was in the school did it at IT. I know it's, you know, apples and oranges, but I'm not sure exactly specifically with the towns that Boston Light and Sound did. But I'm happy to do some research on that, because clearly, as everything else presented before me tonight, you know, prices and costs keep continuing to rise.
Right.
So that's certainly something that I'm happy to look into.
Okay, thank you.
Have we looked at, as an alternative, having this funded through the schools? Would they have the staff to be able to do this?
No, they not what we do. I think we could, the third night of town meeting last year, we held in the auditorium.
Right.
And that was an extraordinarily low-cost event because it was all the electronics are already built into the school room.
Right.
But it's too small for our annual town meeting, so we have to do it elsewhere where there are not electronics, and that's the problem. So, no, I don't think the school department would cover it.
Well, I mean, they don't have to cover it, but it would may be more cost efficient
Yeah.
for the town to pay the overtime for their staff to run it.
Yeah, the staff-wise, they don't have that kind of staff. No, they don't have the expertise.
Or the sound system. I mean, it's an interesting idea to look into.
Yeah.
If we probably need to upgrade the sound system at the high school anyways, and maybe that could cut, cover
Or-
some of this cost for paying 50,000 plus each year.
Well, we're going to upgrade the roof at the school, so we can just have it on the roof. It'll be, a band playing up there. It'll be, exactly.
At least we're no longer hanging the speakers from the roof. Like we were.
Okay.
All right. I'm comfortable
Any
with
other
moving
comments or questions from members of the public? Seeing none, I am prepared to accept a motion on Article 11. Item 11, I'm sorry.
I will make a motion to authorize the town administrator to sign the agreement with Boston Light and Sound for audiovisual services for the 2025 annual town meeting in an amount not to exceed $54,171.70.
Second, roll call vote, Liz.
Aye.
And I'm an aye as well. It is approved.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is the Town Administrator Fiscal Year 26 Municipal Budget Recommendations.
Okay.
Mr. Mayo,
I feel like there should be a drum roll.
go for it.
So Michelle has the presentation up on the screen. It's a 4-slide presentation. This will be brief. On slide 2, you'll note this is just some of the parameters under which we were acting this year. Remember that when we signed the MOU, the Financial Management Plan of 2023, we in essence created a bifurcated decision process for budgeting with the town. We have one series of requirements that we have to meet, and that's to make sure we have enough revenue to fund the budget that we put forward. But the second and new self-imposed item is to make sure that we are within our 3.5% increase over prior year expenditures cap. That MOU, the Financial Management Plan, was signed by the Select Board, School Committee, and NADCOM in '23. And since then, we have been, the municipal.
I was just going to add, it was also signed by you as the Town
Myself,
Administrator
that's right, yeah.
and by the School
The school
Superintendent.
superintendent, that's
Yes.
exactly right. Yep, thank you. And we have all, the schools and the municipal budget have all been keeping in our budget recommendations in accordance with that MOU since that date. Just a quick note that all self-supporting departments are excluded from this 3.5% cap as our number of shared services. So just a note. So the FY26 municipal budget gap. So in October of this past year, I sent the department heads a memo requesting them to put together a level services budget, as I do most years. It's not always a guarantee. Sometimes it could be level fund or level service or 1% increase or decrease, et cetera. We generally do a level services request. I like to understand what they believe, what your department heads believe is needed to provide the same level of service to the public that they did the prior year. I think it's a valuable bit of information to have. Whether or not we can fund it every year is always a question, but I think it's valuable to know that. So that's usually my request. It was my request this year. Those requests from the department heads came in at $38,016,166. The 3.5% cap as taken from Appendix B of the MOU signed in 2023. So we knew this number 2 years ago, as we know next year's. We knew next year's for 2 years ago as well. Is $37,205,344. That leaves us a budget gap that we need to close of $810,822 from what the department had recommended. So with that, I have a couple of pages we're walking through to explain to you how we are recommending we go about closing that budget gap. So I'll just note generically that I think there are a lot of salaries and expenses that will be shifted, some to revolving funds, some reductions in hours, some moving contracts, et cetera. But generically, I've got some general categories here that I think will explain what we're recommending. So Public Works, we're going to do some salary adjustments to the tune of $177,897. With the Recreation Department, we're recommending a salary adjustment by moving a salary from the fund, from the general fund to the revolving fund of $130,525. The Fire Department has an expense adjustment of $96,000. This is the South Shore Regional Emergency Communications Center, the 911 center. We have a new assessment process that we're following on that board that resulted in an $80,800 savings over the prior year. So we're applying that here, which is good to know. The Health Department, we are applying some salary adjustments and utilizing opioid funds in different ways that will bring $70,801 in savings. The Police Department has adjusted their expense budgets to the tune of $63,500. The Harbor Master, $51,500 by adjusting salaries, mainly within the Waterways Fund by moving a portion of salaries back over to the Waterways Fund. We did some of that last year, by the way. We're doing a little bit more this year. The Public Safety Utilities budget, this is an expense adjustment applied by the Ware River Water System for $43,250 reduction in their emergency water line. The Reserve Fund, we are adjusting that expense line by $37,356. The finance plan owned by the advisory committee recommends an approximate percentage of the annual budget. We're just rounding down to save $37,000. It's still certainly within the approximate world. The Veteran Services salary adjustments will equal $25,893. A little bit from each of the following: Animal Control, Historic Preservation, and Select Board. Animal Control and Historic Preservation will be minor salary adjustments, with the Select Board expenses coming to the tune of $2,000 out of some expenses. All of those adjustments, salary adjustments, will result in Article 4 adjustments to the tune of $22,773, which brings us to our total of $810,822 in savings that we needed to balance the budget to the 3.5% cap. So I'll start off by apologizing to Select Board Member Klein. I understand that the 3.5% is a cap, not a goal, and yet that is where we landed, as we did last year. So that's what I have.
Michelle, anything you wanted to add?
I don't think so. Thank you.
Okay. Liz, I'm going to have you start.
Okay. Well, thank you, Tom and Michelle and Art, for working on this, and to all the department heads. This is not an easy process in general, and I know everyone was very mindful of the cap and really trying to deliver the highest quality services we can with the cap and using the resources they had last year. So I appreciate you putting this together. Certainly, we committed to the 3.5%, and we had no intention of straying from that. So although we heard the budgets over the last several weeks, we knew there were going to be some hard decisions to make, and that this is where we would end up. So I certainly, want to give this some more thought, but appreciate that we are really trying to deliver the same level of services, high quality services to the town within the budget. And, without significantly expanding services, I think that's reasonable. So I appreciate everybody's efforts, though, to make that happen. I don't have any questions on specific line items right now.
Yes, so this is the time when we see the impact of our commitment to 3.5 impacting the services to be delivered. And in some cases, it's a net loss of salary, perhaps an employee. In another cases, it is a shifting of the revenue source out of the operating budget.
Right.
So as to avoid other folks experiencing the salary adjustment. It would be nice to wave a magic wand and not have to do these.
I searched high and low for that magic wand, Joe.
Yeah, I know. But Liz and I were both part of the commitment to live to the 3.5, and we appreciate that you're doing that. Can I ask? I know you've communicated with the department head what the reaction was.
Yeah, disappointment. We had a long conversation with the police chief today. Disappointment, but understanding. The reality of one of the reasons this number is significantly higher than last year. And I'm very much hopeful that Michelle's not over here. She can't kick me under the table for saying this publicly, but I'm hopeful that it will be significantly higher than next year as well, is that this is the year we're settling several CBAs. When those CBAs settle at something higher than our commitment, it's difficult to fit them into the budget that year without significant service impacts. And we're doing our best to do this. I think I said last year that this is a healthy exercise for a town to try to, cut off some of the chaff that accumulates over several years, but over many years and many decades. But I think that we're getting to the point now where we're thinned out, and additional cuts to this of this degree are going to start impacting the public's interaction with their community, and none of us want to see that, But that said, the MOU is good through FY28. We will continue to live to it through that date, and I hope that everybody in all aspects of community government, town government, start to understand the impacts of some of the requests that are made during the course of a year.
Yep.
This is coming to roost, the reality of a lot of those things.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So we are not voting on this.
No.
This is your
That's
your recommendation at this
That's right.
point. And we are now open for public comment. I see Vicki Donlin. If you could just again state your name and address for the record and your comment, please.
Vicki Donlin, 12 Lorette Circle, Chair of the Rec Department, and I'm here because I think it's important that the public understand that we're talking about completely getting rid of the rec director's salary, which is the only funded piece by the town. I think it's a very sad precedent to set. We did our research. We've checked with every other town in this Massachusetts that we could find. We cannot find another town that does not pay its rec director. There are towns where there is revenue stream, such as a golf course, where the rec director is paid through the revenue stream. Again, The rec department has no revenue stream. We do not have an athletic complex where people pay memberships, and we're not talking about the gym downstairs, which has approximately 50 or so members. Mark has been here, I think we were just chatting about 16 years, and I've been here 13 years. I'll tell you, when I joined the rec department, the budget was $600,000. At $600,000, we could not pay the employees we have now. Mark, due to the strength of his leadership, has grown this department astronomically. If something were to happen to Mark, if he were to leave and we were to have to hire someone and tell them that there is no salary attached to the job, that we would hope that they would be as good as the former director in order to make their own salary, would be very difficult, because a lot of what we do is based on, again, the leadership that Mark has developed over these years. I owned a business, and I know how important it is to look at people not as people, but as the role. And the role can change. People can change. Things do change. And to set a precedent where the rec director of the department is not paid by the town, I think can really be very detrimental to the department in the long run. As we all know, Mark lives nearby. So he really works 7 days a week, and that's why he's as successful as he is. So I just wanted the public to be well aware of. I know I've spoken to everyone across from me about this subject that I feel very strongly. I understand that it's tough times and that you have to make cuts, but I implore that this is not the right way to go, to have no rec department budget at all. And to establish that precedent, I think, is not wise at this time. So thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Mr. Chair, I have a couple of comments I'd like to make. So I'd like to point out to the public, anybody listening, and Vicki, you and I have talked about this.
Correct.
This is in no way a reflection on Mark and his work or the importance he makes to the town. This also in no way affects his pay or his ability to earn his retirement, all of his benefits, everything stays exactly the same. Mark still comes, he's still an employee of the town, he still comes to work for the town, he still works for the rec department. I would also note that the rec department is in fact significantly benefited by the town. They are supported by the accounting department, the IT department, the maintenance department, the HR department, the treasury department. All of the fields that are used by the rec department are owned by the town. All of the facilities that they play out of and work out of are owned and run by the town. So I would say that I think it's a slight exaggeration to suggest that the town is not supporting the rec department. What we're doing is simply moving the rec department's salary or the rec director's salary into under the rec department revolving fund that already pays every other salary of all of the rec department employees, as we do with all of the enterprise funds. For instance, Kevin Whalen, who was here earlier and works for under the enterprise fund at the South Shore Country Club, his salary is paid by that enterprise fund. It's a very similar situation. There is absolutely no risk to Mark or his job, and I think to suggest otherwise might not be exactly accurate. And I look forward to working with Mark for the next 10 years.
I certainly did not suggest that there was any risk for Mark. My point is it's a risk for the department. Should Mark decide to leave or something were to happen to Mark, how would the department hire someone else in a role where there is no salary guaranteed by their employment? I mean, the rec department, as I say, is successful due to the fact that it has such strong leadership. It has grown astronomically over the last 13 years as I've watched it, from 600,000, and that's my point. I've taken a look at complementary towns or comparable towns. They don't do as Mark has shown each year to this group. We happen to have a 10-week summer program. That's due to the leadership. Most towns have maybe 8 weeks of summer. So all of those add to what is the revenue that is brought in. What I'm suggesting, and Michelle made a comment to it earlier, is we don't have a revenue stream, as does the country club with an enterprise fund. should that happen at some point, I think that there would be an opportunity for the rec director to be paid through that revenue. But I've heard you talk about the other departments, water department, revenue stream, building department, there's a revenue stream. I understand, Tom, that you're telling us that we have the fields, et cetera. None of them generate revenue unless someone is directing that ability to create revenue. So, very different.
In every situation with like the country club, there's no revenue unless there's someone available to generate, to direct it.
The golf club is a revenue stream.
But we need someone who's going to run that. So
golf will go on if someone's running it or not. I mean, the golf club, matter of fact, as you may all remember, for 6 months, we had Bill Friend, who has passed, was a wonderful gentleman who stepped into the role. So anyway, I've tried to make my point, and I'll leave it there.
Got it.
Thank you.
Just to make sure, I don't want people fearing that Mark is leaving or otherwise he's not. He has no plans to leave. If he did, we would rehire that position as a rec director, just like we did with the other employees in that office. When there's turnover, we post and we hire them. Just like every other employee with the town, it would be the exact same situation with the rec director.
Liz, anything else?
No.
Michelle? Any other member of the public?
Thank you.
Okay, so, Tom, I appreciate your fulfilling your obligation that you made to the town, and we will review your proposed budget adjustments.
Thank you.
Next item are appointments or reappointments. I don't believe we have any to make this evening. So I will move on to public comment on items that are not on the agenda. Any members of the public with comments or, not comments or, just comments, items not on the agenda? I am seeing none. So we will move to town administrator and select board reports, beginning with Robert.
I have nothing this evening. Thank you.
Michelle.
Me either, thank you.
Mr. Mayo.
Just I approved 3 one-day special permits over since our last meeting. There will be a winter escape event over at the Hingham Jewelers on Thursday, February 13th from 4 to 8 with an estimated attendance of 20 people and no police detail was required. There will also be a casino night at Chalet Shalom over on March 22nd from 7 to 10 p.m. with an estimated attendance of 125%, and there will be a police detail there.
Estimated, I'm sorry, what was it?
125?
Persons, not percent.
People. What did I say?
Percent.
Did I say?
Yes.
Sorry. I was just doing my budget. And then at the South Shore Conservatory, the Performathon Adult Recital and Reception will be held on April 4th from 6 to 8 p.m. with an estimated attendance of 75 people. And that there will not be a police detail there either.
Got it. Thank you. Liz.
Just wanted to make people aware that there's a public meeting on Thursday. Is it 6 p.m.?
6 p.m., yep.
To discuss the proposed pickleball courts. The town, the consultant, the sound engineer will be there so people can participate via Zoom. Also, we have many high school student athletes competing in states this week, so wishing them the best of luck. That's it.
Yes, and so the meeting on the pickleball court, that is being held by the rec department.
Correct.
And I believe, have they posted so that folks are alerted to that meeting?
I don't believe are they posted?
It's not, you're right, it's not a full meeting, so it hasn't been posted, so I'm glad you.
Oh, it's not?
The pickleball discussion
Yeah.
is just a meeting being held for the public to attend. It's not a public meeting per se.
It won't be publicly posted.
Right.
Okay.
Yes.
Right.
But all the abutters have been.
The abutters have been
Yes.
have been
Okay.
notified. Yes.
Thank you.
So I just want to thank.
I'm sorry, just to be clear, they've been notified to the extent we had access to their information.
Okay.
We've asked others to help us notify, other abutters to help us notify their neighbors.
Okay, so if people have questions, they should call the rec department and get the information.
That's right. Oh, that's right. That's the easiest way. If they call our office, we'll figure it out as well.
Okay, perfect.
And that's tomorrow at 6, I believe.
Thursday.
Oh, you're right, Thursday. I'm a day ahead. Got it. So I just want to thank our I was going to say our staff, but it's really, it's the leadership group here that arranged for the meeting this evening. We covered a lot of material, and we are moving forward, hopefully with all deliberate speed to a successful town meeting. So with that, I will accept a motion to adjourn.
I will make a motion to adjourn.
Second, roll call vote, Liz.
Aye.
I'm an aye as well. We are adjourned. Thank you.
We recognize that taking time to visit, call, or email our town departments to report issues in Hingham doesn't always fit your schedule. Are you looking for an easier way to communicate with the town? Well, now there's an easier way. With the My Hingham mobile app, you can submit service requests or gain information with just a few taps of your phone. To get started, simply download the My Hingham app from the Apple App Store or Google Play, or simply scan our QR code to get the access to the app that's best for your phone. Once you've opened the app, select the Submit a Service Request button. From there, you can choose the type of request you want to submit, whether it's a pothole, a fallen tree, or something else. You'll then be prompted to take a photo of the issue and provide a brief description. You can also use the app to track the status of your issue and receive updates. Using My Hingham puts immediate access to town resources in the palm of your hand, including calendars of meetings and events, agendas for upcoming meetings, building permit filing options, online bill payment options, information about our boards, committees, departments, and services. So why wait? Download the My Hingham app today and report issues and get information on town government with ease.